The first thing to say is it's not very big. I mean, it's really a very small piece of paper. That's it. It's very simple language. It's been criticized for being slightly vague language, slightly loosely drafted, but that is very, very deliberate. And the reason for that is that as anti-bribery laws have been passed worldwide, and the net has tightened, then so clever companies, their advisors, whether it's lawyers or whoever, have helped them find ways around it if they want to carry on paying bribes. And so the UK law builds on the experience of all other previous bribery laws that have been ineffective in certain ways. So where there are grey areas, that is precisely because where other laws have tried to be a bit tighter, companies have quickly found their way around them and the problem remains. The UK law, as I said, by the OECD assessment, is just middle of the road. So it's by no means the toughest, although it's often been described as that. But it is middle of the road. Well, this is the legalese. This is the quote from the Ministry of Justice website about what the offences are. I won't read those out because they are slightly in legalese, but you can look on the Ministry of Justice website, which has all the information you would need about the law. What that means, really, is here are the key features. First of all, it's extraterritorial. And a feature of Bribery Acts is extraterritoriality. And what that means is that if you're a UK citizen or you have close association with the UK or a UK company or a company with close association with the UK, if you pay a bribe anywhere in the world, you can be prosecuted in the UK for it. That's the same with the US law. You would be prosecuted in the US if you paid a bribe anywhere in the world, if you have any association with the US whatsoever. That might even be that you, for example, make a single hotel booking in the US. You would come under the auspices of the US law for the bribery purposes. So extraterritoriality is a key feature of anti-bribery laws because most bribery, of course, probably doesn't take place here in the UK, but it's elsewhere in the world. So we need to capture that in the law. It's both private to private and private to public. In other words, a private sector company paying a bribe to another private sector company, that is caught by the law. But also, if you're a private sector company bribing a foreign public official, which is a very specific designation under the Act, then you're caught by it. Both the giving and receiving of bribes is against the law. So the giving of bribes, obviously, but really important to focus on the receiving of bribes. If somebody has bribed you, then you also are guilty under the law, not just the person who paid the bribe. Associated persons are covered. So if you're in somebody's supply chain and you pay a bribe, then of course you're guilty for paying the bribe, but it may be that the company in whose supply chain you are is also guilty under the law because you paid the bribe on behalf of the company, on behalf of your client, if you're supplying services to that client relevant to the bribe. There is corporate liability. This is a big change in the law. It's been very difficult under the old laws, the old UK laws, to prosecute companies as opposed to individuals who paid the bribe. Now there is corporate liability under the law. But the defense for a company is that I have adequate procedures in place. So if one of your employees or an associated person, one of your suppliers, pays a bribe on your behalf, but you didn't sanction it, you didn't know about it, you did everything you could to prevent it by having adequate procedures in place, you would have a defense under the Bribery Act. You wouldn't be corporately liable. On the other hand, there is director and senior officer liability. It's not just the individual who pays the bribe and not just the corporate liability, but if directors consent or connive in the bribe paying, consenting is sign the form saying, yes, go and pay the bribe. Conniving is knowing it goes on but sort of turning a blind eye. Then those directors and officers are also guilty. And the penalty is unlimited fines and 10 years imprisonment. So it is a pretty strict law. As I said, don't go overboard in thinking it's the toughest in the world, because it by no means is. But it is much tougher than the laws we currently have in place, partly because it's much clearer, and so the chances of enforcement are much better. And it contains several things there that you, of course, need to be aware of in the course of your own businesses. Well, some prominently discussed things: facilitation payments and gifts and hospitality. A facilitation payment is generally reckoned to be a small payment that you might make to speed up a transaction. I don't know how much that is prevalent in your industry at all. It would depend on your business models. But for example, if you're dealing with licensing or permitting or getting visas, any of those sort of things, then typically, or getting things through customs, then typically you might find that facilitation payments are being paid $50, $100, perhaps $500 to speed things up. Important to note, of course, that they're already illegal in the UK, that if you're doing that already, then you're already running a risk of prosecution because they're already illegal. That doesn't change under the new law. But the positive message I'd like to give out is that although people often get trapped into thinking, well, that's just the way they do business in country X, Y, or Z, of course I have to go along with it. It is possible to avoid them, even in the highest risk countries. And something that is very optimistic working for organisations like mine is that you see the good practice as well as the bad practice. And indeed, there is good practice out there. I speak to companies all the time who say, I have a no facilitation payments policy, we don't pay bribes anywhere in the world, and they genuinely mean it and they don't. Maybe the odd rogue employee does it on a one-off basis from time to time, and that's very difficult to stop. But the law isn't really designed to catch, the one-off occasion for the one-off employee is designed to catch systemic bribe paying. You know, if you've built your business on paying facilitation payments everywhere in the world, then yes, we do want to stop that, and that's what the legislators want to stop. Gifts and hospitality, well, there has been particular concern over Section 6 of the Act, which refers to foreign public officials. But the guidance that is due to come out from the Ministry of Justice any time now, they haven't announced the date, it could be this week, next week, it could be a little bit longer, is seeking to give companies comfort on this. And the draft guidance published in November last year said that reasonable and proportionate gifts and hospitality would be okay. And likewise, the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act guidelines say that reasonable, proportionate and bona fide expenditure is okay. So don't be fooled into thinking that suddenly gifts and hospitality are not okay. Of course they're okay. They're a normal part of doing business. If they're being used as bribes, they're not okay. And the test is these words, reasonable and proportionate. And that's what individual companies and industries, I think, need to sort out for themselves. What is really reasonable, proportionate? There are some good tests here, incidentally. One is just on transparency. Would you be embarrassed if it got put in the press, or your competitors or your clients got to know that you had paid, that you had made a gift or given hospitality to a certain level? If you would feel embarrassed about it, then it may be that it's not really reasonable and proportionate, and actually it's just tipped over the edge. Another is, what would a reasonable person in the UK think? That is a specific test in the Act. If these things come before a jury, then the test is, would a reasonable person in the UK think it was a bribe? Well, imagine it gets put in the Daily Mail and somebody's reading that. Are they going to say, well, you know, there's nothing to worry about there? Or are they going to say, shock horror, that was a bribe? You have to bear that in mind when you're trying to assess what's reasonable and proportionate.